Ready to go? Good evening. This is the Wednesday, July 1st, 2026 meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. Prior to a heat wave on July 4th, I'll take the roll. MC and Peter Somsich. Here. Kevin Charette. Here. And D'Antonio. Present. Tom Rooney is unable to make it. Betsy Blaisdell is out of the country. Tracy Cameron is not here with us. From staff, we have Peter Rice, Director of Public Works, Jillian Harris from Planning, Christine Sproviero from Department of Public Works, and Stephanie Secor, our faithful minute. A couple of items up front. Tracy and I have been working on the window dressers project. That's where we get volunteers to get together and assemble window inserts that provide insulation and drastically cut fuel consumption. So we met with the city manager and she's working on a location that we can take an afternoon and bang window inserts together with a lot of volunteers. And I talked to the Portsmouth Rotary, so they're going to usher us in so we can make a pitch for a hands-on Rotary work day. So that's coming together. Once we know the date, we can align around that. And window dressers takes care of finding the households that can use the inserts and can save the money, and it should be a good project for the fall. We had the communication plan that we went over last weekend for Portsmouth Community Power. I told you all we're going to take that to the council to the next meeting. Well, it got delayed till the next meeting, and the next meeting get approved. So that's our roadmap. And thanks to Stephanie and Monty who together.
We've been following that spreadsheet of messages in the newsletter. This week we had the energy efficiency note because we're not ready for prime time on the rates, but it's coming up.
Asked me was writing columns.
We spread it through the.
If anybody would like to write columns for the newspaper, after that, be good. Sure. We have, before we get into Jones Avenue and Apex, I wanted to give you a little background on the question of should we allow CPC&H to refresh customers or not. In our discussion, Councillor Bagley asked, has the Energy Committee taken a look at that issue? And I said, no, we haven't, but we can. So it's something that was discussed at the council meeting. There was a little more discussion, I think, than that. So that's the origin of that. So we'll get to that. That's our last item of business. So as you saw in the minutes, we had a number of questions for Apex that we wanted to follow up on Jones Avenue. I think many of us had high hopes for solar projects there, but we have to deal with the realities of the numbers as they are. So Peter Rice was gracious enough to say, well, we'll bring them back for follow-up questions. And so with that, welcome to Michael and Ian.
Yes. Hi.
And thanks for letting us dig a little deeper into the numbers that you gave us. And see who has some of the questions.
Well, I'll just start by saying hi, Mike. Long time no talk. I think I was talking to Mike at 1 o'clock today. And
hi, Ben. Yeah, it's been almost half a day.
Totally. And Ian, I think I've met you before. Were you at Grid?
I was.
Yeah,
I was. I was with National Grid for 14 years.
yeah, I thought so. You look really familiar. Um, was hoping to try to maybe just expand upon a little bit of the analysis that you guys had done. Really appreciate how Peter and team have made you available. Um, I think I'm looking at the presentation you guys provided, and it is primarily conclusions, and I just had some kind of follow-ups on some of those conclusions. I understand that you guys looked at three different options, and those three different options were kind of a single system that's direct connected in front of the meter. Option two was a bit of a hybrid where you had some direct connect in front of the meter and some behind the meter going to a different meter behind the school. And then third was more of a PPA approach, more of a turnkey EPC kind of a thing. And I understand the conclusions that the second approach was more attractive because it potentially, availed us of net metering opportunities. And the way that the results were presented, I wasn't sure what the results looked like on option one if the ITC were back. I know that the ITC was part of the one big beautiful bill and, had that, phase out and you had to kind of get going quickly to avail yourselves of those tax credits. So for this proposal, it seemed like that might not be an opportunity. But I'm wondering what the results are for option one if you assume the ITC comes back. I think it's pretty popular on both sides of the aisle. We're going to have another federal election here in a couple of years. Sounds like maybe we don't have the upfront capital outlay planned out or anything, so we have a little bit of time and seems plausible to hypothetically assume the ITC might come back. So I think that's just a toggle in your model. Second question I had was really around the net metering assumptions. The second option was most attractive because we were able to partially net meter some of that. And I'll be honest, I don't know what the current status of the city's net metering situation is, but I think New Hampshire is a group net metering state with some special opportunities afforded to municipalities. And I didn't know if that meant that we needed to stay under a megawatt. I didn't know if that was something that we could net meter more of the project in front of the meter, because if it's group net metering, who cares actually where you interconnect? And so I didn't know if those really two major issues, and there's some other minor ones, but those were kind of the two big questions I was hoping to understand a little better. I think my colleague here had also kind of wondered maybe a little bit around the cash flow situation. We understand that, you do a project finance deal, there's a big outlay, you're avoiding some costs later, all that good stuff. But getting a sense for when it may affect an operating expense kind of situation with, negative cash flows and positive cash flows, when the project assumptions might turn positive there on the cash flow side of things. Obviously, CapEx is important, but so is OpEx when we're thinking about stuff like this. So that was kind of a third layer of questions we had, and didn't know if you guys were in a position to be able to provide that. Appreciate that this is the DPW's consultant, and you guys are on a limited engagement, and the terms and conditions there are probably set. So really not asking you to do a whole bunch of extra work, but to the extent that some of that information is readily available with your model and whatnot, was hoping to maybe just have a conversation about what some of these other alternatives or various permutations on the three options you developed might look like under some slightly adjusted assumptions.
Okay. Let's see. I can start, and I may ask you to re-ask some of your questions in the middle and end because that was a mouthful, but I got some of it down in front of me here. So all three of the models, or all three of the scenarios, did assume that the state would use, or the city would use the available group or remote net metering concept that allows you to export your power and then get a credit for the supply rate and use that credit elsewhere. So
Okay.
all three of those did that. With the private PPA, private developer PPA approach, that was the least favorable because you would only get a discount on the rate. You'd still have to pay the developer for the rate, which is the PPA part, right?
Okay.
And I assumed in that a 15% discount. So you're not getting the full value of the cost of the output directly into the accounts of the city. So you're only getting a portion of it because you have to share so much with the developers so that they make money.
Yep.
The hybrid approach had one benefit and one drawback in this area. So by splitting the systems, I think you heard last time that you'd be able to move faster, and that's why you'd be able to get the ITC very, very likely if you could get a design build going this, end of summer. I think it's still possible, if you hired one firm to kind of do it all. It's still possible. It's getting to the edge of not being possible, but you'd still have two good systems, one of which would be connected behind the meter at the high school. By doing that, you would have more energy during the day when the high school is using power and offsetting potentially some of their demand. We would assume maybe a third of the nameplate could be, we were not able to do that analysis because we didn't have the high school's load data. That was not shared with us. So if we we got bills, but we didn't get 24/7, 8760 load curve on it.
Okay.
The downside of that, you get the upside of some savings, but the downside is that you need another line reaching from the landfill through the woods to the high school. And given some concerns about, there's the athletic fields and there's the walking trails and so forth, it would likely be most beneficial and acceptable to put it underground, which is more costly. And it's about a third of a mile, I think. So not cheap. It would add some cost. That's the primary cost difference between the two system approach and the single system. The single system has a drawback in that it's so large that it would trigger what's a transmission level study by Eversource. So a larger system over a megawatt needs to be referred to ISO New England, and then they say, okay, how big is it? Okay, it's 1.7. Okay, yeah, we have to do an affected system operator study, which adds 9 months to the project and an extra $50,000 to $80,000, depending on the cost of the study, a bunch of engineering and modeling that has to be done, and potential transmission upgrades at the substation level. So, and that could be much, much more if it triggered. A smaller system usually doesn't trigger any transmission level upgrades, but it is possible because it's putting out energy every day, even on the weekends in May when nobody's, on Mother's Day when nobody's around and nobody has their AC on. So it can flow backwards onto the transmission system. The smaller two systems would move faster because they would not be subject to that ASO study and would have lower utility fees overall, but higher interconnection because you have the second line. That second line, though, is more than offset by getting the ITC. So so just to summarize, all the approaches use remote net metering. The city would get the full benefit of that net metering output at the base cost, at its raw cost in the city-owned options. The two-system approach has the same output as the single system. So all the numbers there are the same. you're just able to move faster, get the ITC as a tax equity refund that was enabled by the the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, and go from there. So that's a summary on that. Any follow up on those points? Or
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thank you for the summary.
Mhm.
So I understand the megawatt threshold and how that triggers an ASO study, which adds time,
Yep.
which disqualified the ITC from option one. But
Yes.
if you could help me understand the qualification for the ITC piece where, okay, maybe you don't need an ASO study under the split or hybrid option, but I think if you're going underground through some wetlands, the permitting on that may take a little bit longer than just the straight go in front of the meter approach. So in terms of in-service, I don't know if you're getting something a lot sooner. And I guess if I understood the ITC qualification rules a little better, I'd understand how you made that timing distinction. Or was permitting really kind of assumed away, but studies weren't?
Yeah, I don't, it would be controlled by the city itself, by
Mhm.
the Conservation Commission of the city. I understand the state does not have uh, jurisdiction on that, and they don't have it's a local control issue. So, given that it's a city project and city permitting run by the DPW and an outside, professional firm with a civil engineering firm, I think it's entirely doable. People build in and around wetlands all the time. It just has to be carefully laid out so that you're, and planned so that you manage your soils and so forth and your runoff in buffer areas. But once it's built, it wouldn't, be an issue. And they build transmission lines through the middle of swamps. So it happens.
Sure. So the jurisdiction on the permitting was an important factor in assuming enough speed to get the ITC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know your city politics or your Concom, and I don't know
Sure.
who sits on it.
Yep.
That
And
wasn't
Ben,
part of
that
our,
that was one of the areas of concern we had because we didn't necessarily agree with that opinion.
Understood.
We thought
I was gonna
there's going
ask
to be
that
a bit
question.
more permitting required because it goes through prime wetlands and that does get regulated by the state.
And it's a capped landfill.
And it's a cap landfill.
So yeah. Okay. And
yeah, we did highlight the permitting for the landfill and the change to its closure status. Yeah, I consulted with a uh, permitting site survey specialist for my opinion, who talked to somebody who used to work for the state. So that's the source. I'm not saying you're wrong, Peter. I just you might want to dig into it. He said that the city would have jurisdiction. That's the basis of my opinion.
on the net metering piece, I understand that you've assumed net metering under both option one and option two.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's really helpful. I'm not sure I understood what I thought I heard about how the option two, where you split and you go behind the meter at the high school, provided a slight advantage because you'd be carrying some of the high school's load.
Yes.
If you're in a net metering situation, is there, I mean, what am I missing?
Yeah. So they would use some of it directly
Yep.
while it's being generated, and whatever they did not use would be exported, and you would get a credit at the meter for that, either to be used later in the year by the high school directly or transferred to another account.
So the in front of the meter approach, you're doing the delta between the net metering rate and whatever the supply rate is. Whereas under the split
They're this,
approach,
yeah, they're the same in New Hampshire for a
okay, great.
system this size. It's just the supply rate.
Okay. And if there's no delta, but you're consuming some of your own production that you're getting a better deal on, I'm still, if there's no delta, I'm not sure I'm understanding how one's
Yeah,
advantageous to the other.
sure, sure. So the high school is a big enough customer that a large part of its bill is based on kilowatt charges or demand charges for
Oh, the
delivery
fixed
and
charges.
and
Okay.
transmission. Yeah, I mean they're set by the amount of power being used at the peak
Yep.
uh, in during the month. So, and I'm pretty sure that NeverSource New Hampshire is a non-coincident peak, meaning it's not the system peak, but it's just whenever you peak, whenever you use the most electricity. Um, and that sets both your distribution and also your transmission uh, demand charge for that for that month. So if you have the solar on while the school is using some power, it's going to lower that peak by some
Right.
amount. So if the peak is at 3, when all the students are there on a hot summer afternoon, or not summer, but late spring, early fall afternoon, or winter, and you've got some electric stuff running, pumps and whatnot, uh, those periods would be a little bit less, so you'd save some on the demand charges.
The demand charges. Got it.
And if,
Understood.
if you put in a battery to capture more,
Yep.
then you could really control your demand charges. And I mean, it's not cheap.
Sure.
Eversource
Sure.
gets their money.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Electric
and then
customers used to pay my salary too. So
that's right. And I'm looking at the summary where we're comparing NPVs.
yeah,
Um, looks like, actually, I'm not saying it. The slide 9 shows single system without ITC, 2 systems with tax equity refund. NPV is almost 25% higher. It's 5.2 million versus 4.1 million.
yep.
And just in a rough approximation, what would you attribute most of that difference to? The ITC or the additional net metering benefit associated with going behind the meter at a direct load customer?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the source or that slide. Let me just
Lost you.
He's looking at his numbers.
yeah, hold
Oh,
on.
you think he's, okay,
That's what I think.
all right.
No, he's talking.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we got it.
Okay, great. Yeah, my internet might have locked up for a second there. Um, I just this might be it. No, that is not it. Michael, do you have the presentation handy? I thought I had downloaded a copy.
I'm looking for it too.
Okay.
If you Google Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee, it's in our meeting materials.
Oh, okay. All right. That would be the easiest way to do it. Terrific.
Maybe an easier one, Ian, would be what if you had option 1 with the ITC? Do you have an NPV
Yeah,
on that?
no, option one with the ITC would be better. I agree. And just to answer your question directly, I do think it's possible that the ITC could be reinstated. I think that's a popular opinion, especially in developer circles, because it's come back before. It's gone away or been getting phased out, and it's come back. And with the domestic content rules and so forth, people are paying a bit more for panels than they used to. So it's still helpful, and it's encouraging U.S. industry now more than paying, Chinese companies, especially on the inverter front. So, I mean, if they could keep the domestic content and bring the ITC back, or maybe at a lower level or something, absolutely. So that project The majority of that difference is from the ITC,
Yep.
offset by the cost of the increased connection on this scenario two with the two systems. So if you have one system, you could export it all and forget about the high school. And if you got the ITC, it would be a better deal. Yeah.
Minus whatever we had to pay for an ASO study.
Yes. Yes. But that's included in that scenario already.
Okay. That's really helpful. Do you have a sense of the cash flow positivity over the horizon?
Yeah, it depends on how you consider cash flow, because if you have, if you're looking at it here, let me just get rid of this. If you're looking at it from the combined system, for instance, um, you have savings, energy savings, because of the credits being transferred to various city accounts of over 300,000 a year. It goes 343, 349, 356, 364. And then you have revenue from the sale of renewable energy certificates, unless you chose not to sell those, of over 100,000 a year. And that generally declines. So the two kind of offset each other over time. And you're getting a total value of in the high 400s up to 500,000 and a little more going forward. So that's per year.
Okay.
If you assume a debt payment of about 278, which is borrowing all of the money that you need to build the thing on, as soon as the EPC contractor turns it over to you and you pay for it, you would get a net of $167,000 benefit, savings and revenue, cash revenue from the system, and that would grow into the 200s over time. So from the city's total budget point of view, you would be cash flow positive from day one,
Yeah.
and it would grow substantially over time into the $200 range. I mean, $200,000 range.
What was your annual debt figure?
$278,000.
Okay, and that's,
And that's without the ITC at the city's rate of borrowing, like a muni bond at 375.
That's great, right?
and how many years is the bond?
20.
20.
Pretty sure it's 20. Yeah, 20. So it's all paid off in year 20. And then you're throwing off, $500,000 of revenue and savings every year after that.
Okay.
Ian, I have a question. I noticed the assumption of like a 2.5% escalation rate for the electricity rates.
Yeah.
That seemed conservative to me. And I wonder if
Yeah.
that means, I don't know, I wonder if that means that this project might be even more attractive. How would you reflect on if rates go up, what that means for this project?
Well, it would mean your savings would go up significantly. It is just the supply rate. So the biggest driver of electric rates recently has been distribution and transmission costs, which have grown at like 4.5 to 6.5% a year for a decade through rate cases and add-ons and everything else. That's more of a Massachusetts number. I think it's a little lower in New Hampshire. But certainly supply has increased, and winter supply in particular, because of natural gas being tight in the winter, because most of it is used for heating. So it's not available to generators. So they switched to oil, and of course we know oil is crazy right now, so it's going to be an expensive winter for electricity generation. Oil, kerosene, and other like jet fuel and things like that. So there's a variety of different dual fuel generators on the system.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it could be a little bit conservative, but like when a solar uh, project gets appraised, appraisers tend to use a number that's more like 2.5, just
Okay.
to be, kind of middle of the road.
And then I just for my benefit, maybe for everyone's benefit, I saw the levelized cost at $58 per megawatt hour. I wonder if you could speak to whether you think that's like a positive outcome of this project or how it compares essentially to what we should be looking for as a target for an LCOE.
Yeah, for a what?
A levelized cost of energy, electricity.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, LCOE, yeah. Uh, yeah, I used a fairly simple formula for that. There's more complex ways to do it, but I think it gives you a number that's a good reference point. Um, I know you can't build and operate natural gas for less than that these days, um, especially in New England year round. Uh, Wind is cheaper, but harder to get built, especially offshore these days. Um, Landfill gas, kind of expensive, uh, pretty short supply. So I mean, it's a good price, I think, for a renewable resource, for a solar resource, especially in such a far northern uh, place. So it's very reliable, no moving parts, and you might lose an inverter, might blow up on you or something, not blow up, but fail at some point. But that's about the extent of the O&M that goes into those. You have to weed whack around them every now and then. So
Get a goat.
yeah, you could do
Actually, that has ours.
agrivoltaics and get
right.
some goats in there. Absolutely. A couple of
I
sheep.
heard sheep are
Sheep,
better.
yeah.
Yeah, sheep.
Yeah, the
goats will
goats
jump
might
on
ram them. I
panels.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sheep, agrivoltaics. That's been a big thing in Massachusetts, Western Mass.
Uh, the competing case for the city's bonding capacity would be a fleet of rooftop solar.
Uh-huh.
Did you guys look at that at all, or you were strictly looking at our Jones Avenue situation?
That's right. Our scope was to just look at Jones. We've been asked to develop some alternative scope for potentially helping with the rooftop aspect, and that's something that we'll be providing to Peter and Christine shortly.
We're also looking at buying out Madbury as well, and see if there's additional capacity for more solar up there too. So.
Right. I think that's, when we as an energy committee look at what we could recommend to the council, Jones Avenue alone without that comparison to what we could do with a fleet of rooftop stuff
Yeah.
is incomplete. But I'm interested that it's cash flow positive from the beginning. And that's without the ITC.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
we were able to get the ITC, that would be quite a good return. Lost my question. Who's got another one?
I had a question for Peter. The slides will be the final deliverable.
Christine,
Apex is working on a formal report for us, so I think it'll be a little clearer than the PowerPoint.
Wonderful.
And that's, I can just add, that's in process, but it is gonna rely, the analysis is summarized in the
Yep.
slides, and we'll expand upon that a little bit in the report, but it'll be similar. Conclusions are all the same.
And have you encountered any situations where a municipality has looked for other off-takers. So there's a combined effort, combined project. And is there any merit to looking at that? I've had some people
Are
mention.
you talking
that.
about a microgrid
Yeah,
to the adjacent properties?
yeah.
Yeah, I have, it depends on exactly what you mean. You can certainly have, I don't have the rule memorized in New Hampshire about what the municipal group net metering configuration is. If it's owned by the city, if you could sell it to individuals, I'm not sure about that. You may, and that's something that we could follow up on and answer in the final report.
If it's in your scope, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sell to others. I looked it up before, so I think I have the answer somewhere. I just need to refresh my memory. So that would be a possibility. You could certainly share it with any city account.
Right.
To physically connect customers to that, you'd basically be using Eversource's lines, because to do it otherwise would be prohibitively expensive, and also the city would not be allowed to build its own lines in the public way. That would violate Eversource's franchise rights, and they would fight you tooth and nail on that.
Okay. Okay.
Does that apply to abutting properties? Like that doesn't cross the right of way?
That's why we were able to take it directly to the high school, because
Right.
the city owns all of the land between the landfill and the high school.
Right. But there might
So,
be
so
abutting.
yeah, that would be fine if you had a private line. But again, like I said, you would have to have additional, like if you wanted to take it down to a residential level, that's, 240 240 volts, and you'd need additional transformers and power distribution equipment, kind of like almost like a mini system to create that, and you would be putting poles up everywhere to serve people through their backyard. And I don't know what the law is on having a second power tap on your house. I've not heard about that. That, but I guess it's possible.
Yeah.
Generally, I've never seen a microgrid that made sense economically to anyone, and I oversaw a couple from a regulatory point of view when I was at National Grid, and now they were planned by the electric company, so they were kind of heavily girded exercises, but still, when they presented the bill to the various cities in Massachusetts and New York that had been interested in this, that they were like, forget that, because it's a lot of infrastructure that you have to build to operate safely,
Yes,
and then you have to maintain it.
right. And there's whatever the governance of the private entities are.
Yeah, yeah,
In this case, possibly a condo association, which makes my
yeah, yeah,
blood run cold.
yeah. Had not thought about that. That wasn't in the scope. The DPW did want to look at the potential of serving the high school as a part of this, so that was our microgrid there.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wish it were, 500 yards away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's see. It's about 700. Yeah, it's about a third of a mile.
Yeah.
From what I recall.
Yeah. We've seen
Maybe a little more.
a number of
Maybe
these,
0.7. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
a lot of towns we looked at for comparison had land next to a sewer plant, for example, where the
That
solar.
makes tremendous sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Go directly behind the meter at a water treatment plant, that's great sense.
Right. I wish we had that fact set, but we don't. Any other questions?
I think part of that the private partnership exploration or a question of whether they could be linked to adjoining condo associations there was like, I think someone raised the idea of a PPA. Is that something that we'd also want to or like has been considered here? Or I was trying to look up if there is precedent that might be useful. I'm thinking about financing of the project and what creative financing opportunities beyond debt financing.
But I think Ian's pointed out that we'd want to make sure that we'd still be eligible for the municipal group net metering rate.
Right, yeah.
And if we're selling to non-municipal entities from the same deal,
Yeah,
we'd want to think through what that does to the
That.
economics of the project.
right. Okay. I was just I'm scraping my brain for other things creative alternatives we discussed.
Yeah, I mean, folks can get essentially the same benefit by just taking the credits and paying for the credits. It's it would behave essentially the same in New Hampshire because distribution volumetric credits are not included in net metering for customers. Now they could have some coincidental use, which would be a little bit higher, but I believe that the new net metering regime in New Hampshire has two-way meters and actually charges customers for their distribution rate, even on net metered usage. So things have tightened up since 23 or 22 when that reform was passed. So I think the benefit would subject to check would be essentially the same to do a physical connection with somebody and just selling them the credits.
Right.
If it's allowed under the municipal group net metering.
Okay.
You save yourself a lot of O&M too.
Sure. Yeah, and avoid risk if you're somebody.
Avoid risk. Yeah, you wouldn't have to fix it. Yeah, line goes down. You have to drive somebody. Somebody has to drive out there and put it back up. So you avoid all of that. Let Eversource do it.
Right.
They're the pros.
Care to give us a brief what this project has going for it and what it's has going against it?
Are you asking me to provide that sort of summary statement?
Yeah.
I think you have a great piece of land that's relatively flat and can take solar that would provide a valuable asset for the city and help the city lower its bills by a couple $100,000 a year and have a net present value of over $3.8 million after considering all the O&M and the debt repayment. I think the downside is that you would have to use some of your bonding capacity to do it and have a new infrastructure project and a new piece of infrastructure to take care of going down the road, which the DPU they're the pros at that. So I'm sure they could do that.
Right.
But that would be your downside. You would own it, and it would be the city's responsibility to maintain it.
Right.
And manage it.
Yeah.
But I don't see a lot of downside. Yeah.
What about the opportunity cost of pursuing a different approach with the same available net metering opportunity? If the city wanted to instead do net metering at its other buildings and whatnot, we would want to factor in the opportunity costs associated with that relative to using it on this 2 kilowatt array or whatever it would be.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't aware that the city had, if you're going to create, such substantial savings that your bonding capacity would be limited in some fashion, as maybe it's state determined. I don't know, but I think the market would like it, although I'm not a bond market expert. Since you're creating such great savings to cover the cost of the debt. The the question of the opportunity cost, it really depends on whether you are truly limited, because if all solar projects created this much benefit or close to it, why not do it all, right? All of the above. We can certainly do that analysis for you. I will say that rooftop smaller solar arrays tend to have higher costs. Um, up to double. That's why residential still costs like $4 to $6 a watt to put on a house. And small commercial, it's just a little tighter and more bespoke in how they're designed and laid out. You're integrating into a building and so forth. So there are costs, and you also have to consider the structural components of the building. If it's a big enough building, it may not have been built heavy enough back in the day to support the solar. There's also fire considerations. A lot of fire departments now, if a building is on fire, it's not even the solar that's on fire, but if the building is on fire and there's solar on the roof, they will let it burn to the ground, because they don't want their guys running into a building that they don't know how strong that roof is underneath the solar. So it is something to consider, that they increasingly been letting houses just burn to the ground that have solar on them.
Well, thank you for the impromptu reaction.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Happy to share, any insights I have.
One more question.
It's not even a question. I just want to make the comment that because we're talking about 20-year intervals, one of the benefits I think that is already occurring now with solar panels is and I experienced this firsthand with a 10-year old solar panel compared to one now. The current one now is 50% more efficient than the old one.
Yes.
So that's an additional value that's built in case in the future we either replace the ones that were there or upgrade the ones when they're 20 years old or whatever. But that is an additional savings and revenue that will be generated because you're getting more power out of the same surface.
I fully agree with you. Yeah. We're seeing that in Massachusetts here steadily. A lot of the projects that were built 10 years ago, we call it slapping new glass. And you slap new glass on a project and the output goes up 40, 50%.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time on a hot evening.
Yeah, it's 75 in my house, so I'm okay. Let's not be driving in it and running around though. Yeah.
Right.
So,
And we look forward to reading the full report.
wonderful. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Thank you for making them available.
Great.
I'm a little more jaded in terms of the costs and stuff. So I would be more comfortable if we had real dollars we're looking at. I think their numbers are a little optimistic in some spots. I think the payback is great. And the cash flow is great, but it's still you're still bonding, $4 million. We have competing other things. And the thought, and I know you guys had said the last time that let's look at bonding all the roofs at the same time and do this one big project. That was not our thought. Our thought was to try to pay as we go, do it a little bit at a time. But this is ultimately, it's a policy decision, and whatever's decided, we will move forward and implement.
Yeah, and it's what's the most benefit for our residents? And it's a pass-through benefit, obviously, if it's costing less to buy electricity for the city. Taxes we don't have to charge, that's
If
carbon we don't emit, that's.
one thing that has come up a number of times, and I'm sure you as a committee know, the reason the city doesn't participate in CPCNH is that twofold. One, they set their rates twice a year, and we budget for, once a year. And two, their budget cycle is off from our budget cycle. That one, they don't have a product that we can use. They've talked about doing it, but we haven't gotten one that's a schedule that we can do. So that's the reason we don't. Currently, we're paying 10.22.
Killer rate.
So it's a favorable
Very good.
rate at the moment. That's good till October of 27.
Councilor, on something like this with the ITC, do we ever, through our city government or lobbyists, kind of go on record with our federal representatives? Here's a real life example of a project that is a tad stalled directly as a result of the ITC being removed, and just kind of go on record that we in Portsmouth have a project that would have perhaps legs and real benefit to the city if the ITC were reinstalled.
So,
It seems like it would be worthy of a letter to our federal representatives just to put a bug in their ear. Just a thought.
It becomes a very compelling case if you have the ITC on the full single proposal.
Because I was hearing from Ben and Ian that, there's folks that are interested in having it repositioned, so.
Yeah.
Might not hurt.
And we can only hope that the solar industry is making the case with their lobbyists in Washington too. To get that tax credit back.
it seems to me that the governor is also warming up more to solar than she used to. For a while she was not interested either in solar or wind. Now it's just wind she doesn't like.
The home's burning to the ground though. Give me the walls.
That should be a warning sign.
Hard to unsee that.
Although I didn't quite
I
understand.
think that's a community by community. I can't imagine our fire department saying they were not gonna do something. That's just,
Well, also,
that seems
We
weird.
get there
That seems odd.
fast
the
enough.
installation I have has external breaker circuits that we can turn off from outside the building. So if there was a fire, they could turn that thing off.
Well, it sounded like it was the structural concerns, more so.
Oh, so structural.
Yeah,
Oh,
structural.
Voting.
Before you go, Peter, how do we develop the rooftop idea? I mean, I'm thinking as a counselor, boy, I'd love to have that compare us.
Yeah, so Christine, maybe you can speak to where we're at.
Yeah, sure. So we are having Apex provide us a quote for additional scope, which would be evaluation at the DPW for solar on the solar ready roof on the new addition. They would help us put together an RFP, and then we'd put that out to solicit. We would also use that RFP as a template for other potential projects throughout the city.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is like do a proof of concept and then have a template to work off of.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier.
Learn
The
from
procurement
it.
process
Yeah.
much more efficient.
Yeah, similar to what Lebanon, New Hampshire's done.
And that would be, the RFP would be the realer numbers than just pro formas.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the follow-up.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I think we pulled a lot of information out of Ian, and he was happy to give it to us. Okay. Good night, everybody.
All right. Enjoy the heat.
You guys saw the rate announcements? We gave you the CPCNH press release from Jackson. Long story short, Eversource and CPC&H are pretty close, within $6 a month. And if CPC&H weren't still trying to recapitalize, basically even fraction. So that's certainly a different and better story than last time. And we gave you a local press release. Stephanie wrote something. I kind of changed the quotes around. And it was, we didn't have a lot of time because we got CPC&H's stuff Monday and we wanted to get this out to you. So it's a draft, very much a draft. Let me get your input. And
This is the,
yes, page 11 in the packet.
oh, I see, thank you.
It's about a page and a half.
The point you just made, you made also in the press release. I just want to be careful on the reserve side. They're always going to have a reserve adder, right? That's just part of their business model. And I saw back in, I think it was their April treasury report, that they're not even going to be to the minimum reserve levels until
It's a long ways off.
to the end of 2028 minimum, right?
That's the
And
90-day reserve.
I think it's 30. Might even be 30. I think it's 30, 75 and 120 or something like that. I don't know what the minimum is, but whatever the minimum is, they're not even going to reach it till the end of 2028. So, it's just part of their rate, and it has been from the get-go. It's not some new temporary thing that they're doing. They've increased, I think, the reserve contribution to accelerate just having some reserves, because they actually went negative.
Right. That's when they put the 2 cent in.
Right, so so what they're doing now, I mean, they're projecting they're going to get to the minimum by the end of 2028. Originally, it was much sooner than that when they were building up reserves quicker when they first went live. So I don't know if it's how helpful it is to say, well, except for, it's like saying Maine, saying, well, if we didn't have sales tax on cars, they'd be as cheap as New Hampshire. Well, the fact is you do have sales tax on cars.
Sure.
And
That's a good point.
CPC&H is always going to have a reserve adder, so it's probably going to fluctuate. And I think they have options to how much they want to, how quickly they want to restore. But I'm just not sure if we should use that as an explanation for why there's a delta, because it's just part of their model. They're always going to have it.
Okay, well, we can take that out. But the essential points were, here's the new rate. It's on up 2% for our customer. It's much closer to Eversource. And we quoted Don Priest talking about people should stay with the coalition for the long game. That's really the gist of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the gist.
Are there other?
Yeah, I thought those. The one point, and I thought I made a copy of. Oh, I did. The point, and this, I get a little. Where So customers can't afford it.
Yes.
I'd stay away from that, you know? I can afford going to Whole Foods, but I'm never gonna do it. You know, I'll go to Market Basket or Hannaford's. It's not a question of being able to afford. I think a lot of people just will go in life with the cheapest, you know, if the value is the same, they'll go with the cheapest. So I'd maybe word that differently. It's not just the lowest income in Portsmouth that we're concerned about switching back. You know, I would just stay away from that kind of description.
That had been our concern when it was considerably higher,
Yes, I agree.
but if, I
Yeah.
think it's.
Yeah, there's just, you know, I'm sure you, being an expert, could word that maybe a little differently.
Yeah, and I read it and it sounded like I was saying, but you should all switch back to Eversource.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
It's just reminding them of the option to switch and how easy it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, the mayor's got this great example of, somebody says, why don't grocery stores have all cage-free eggs? Well, not everybody can afford cage-free eggs.
Yeah.
This is power for everybody, not everybody's. What's that about? Remember that? So what was that, we'll change.
What's the first point you made? I was multitasking. I'm so sorry. I was trying to read it again.
About the reserve.
Okay, about the
Yeah.
reserve. Okay.
Yeah, that
Reserve is always.
it's always part of their, and that kind of gets to another point. I'm not nitpicking. There's just some things I was reading here that as time goes on, you know, we would only start it as a city accruing any reserves to do projects once you got to the max. And we're light years away from being at the max, right? So anyway, we would build up reserves to perhaps put toward projects is if we had an adder on our rate, which I don't think we really necessarily have appetite for right now.
No.
Right.
No.
So,
5 minutes.
yeah, I don't know, but.
We also looked at it and it, you know, a penny doesn't give you as much as you think.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
$15,000.
Yeah. But we've had these references from the beginning that, you know, this CPCNH helps us with our city's sustainability goals. Well, I mean, the transition to anything other than basic service has been pretty anemic, right?
Yeah.
And,
Aspirational, more like.
and yeah, so it's something that we might need to temper that a little bit. I think that the work of this committee is more important to our sustainability goals, perhaps than CPCNH right now, right? When we don't have large volume switching over, you know, we're going into the eighth rate period now, and we just don't really have much migration to those other rates.
No, and we did the contest and
Yeah.
we
And
push.
absent changes in market rates, I just don't see that changing. So just the end of that quote, it's fine as written, but I'm thinking right now it's not as realistic as we, you know, were talking earlier.
And this is the last quote.
The quote where you talk about
First page, last.
also hold it's an adder.
So we had the adder thing that I was hoping to be able to just strike out.
Yeah, I think
This-
so.
This version
Future
of
reserve.
Adobe doesn't let me do that. So this sentence, leave the coalition of striving to balance, or just take out that whole thing?
Well, I put that in there but you know, you guys, how does that land?
Which one were you looking at?
So this,
Coalition is
it's
driving.
worth noting, take that sentence out and then leave or take out the coalition of striving to balance.
I had the same thought.
I almost wonder if it's a little wonky.
I just scratch it.
Like
Yes.
maybe
And which monitors the community power program, and then just take out the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other one is about savings. This one.
The afford be recognized as some
Yeah.
residents.
do we want to go with the thought along the lines of we recognize that if there are residents who can't afford the higher utility prices, they have the option to opt out, or just
like that.
They can't afford.
okay.
It's just reminding
Like, it's
people they
just
can
that
opt.
affordability is a top concern in our community these days. Like, I don't know, you don't have to pin it on.
Yeah, and I don't,
I wouldn't even link it with affordability.
No.
I think, let's just say, we just remind customers that they have the right to switch to any utility they want and switch back to us at any time.
But I think
Just
Without
say,
mentioning
you know,
The
why.
idea that there's advocacy on behalf of residents on the issue of affordability, which is top of mind for many people right now. I don't know, to me, there's some value in
Yeah.
making a nod to it.
We're not really doing that at this point. Maybe in the future, right now, we're asking
We're
people to pay
using
more
it as a
for it, not
lens
less.
which we're considering.
but it also,
It's guiding a lot of
it
these
almost implies
conversations.
though, if you can't afford it, you should stay with CPC and H.
I think it's a
And I don't think
language
we
thing.
should be, I don't think we should be, you know, taking a position that way necessarily in our press
That there
release.
isn't such a delta, yeah. And because
Yeah,
that
and
was
we've
the
also
concern.
said, you know,
And then down here, we say we're giving Portsmouth Community Power gives residents and businesses a choice.
Right.
So that goes for the long-term benefits.
And that, I think our residents may benefit from the coalition's combined buying power.
Okay.
'Cause I don't see buying power going up in the foreseeable future. There's no cities or towns that are lined up right now to join CPC and H.
To reduce their
And,
costs.
and so what their buying power is right now is probably what's going to be for the next year at least. So I don't know if we want to be as concrete as it will benefit,
Mhm.
should. Our residents should benefit from their combined power, right?
Well, we're insinuating somehow that we have better buying power than Eversource, when that's not true.
Well, you're saying in the long term, right? Yeah.
Some
Should
point in the
benefit.
future, yes.
But should
Maybe.
benefit.
Well, yes, yeah, maybe, but.
Even if it doesn't, even if it's not a larger buy than
Well, this is
Eversource,
what I'm
they're
saying.
still,
This is not.
they still have a,
This is not an
they're a player in the
affordability
market.
argument right now for people, that this would help them save on electric bill.
that's what, I mean,
we're
maybe.
pointing out you can save money.
Yeah.
I mean, and the most wealthiest person in Portsmouth or the poorest person, if they want to save money, that's their right.
Sure.
We shouldn't be insinuating it's only for those who can't afford it, or should consider
Right,
switching
right,
back. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, so maybe we just take that out.
Or is it appropriate to, like, where does the city point people, the community action program, or, you know, if you're struggling?
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought of is the advocacy at the state level. I always think that's really
That's-
important.
Yeah, that is.
Is that in here?
No.
And that was part of what Don Crease said,
Yes.
so we can
Right.
add
Okay.
that. I have his actual words, so I can add the advocacy element.
Okay.
I just have one comment.
Yes,
I just note it's just the opening suggests to me that the rates are being increased on, like, at an irregular time, as opposed to maybe it says has advised its member municipalities that the electricity supply rates for the rate period will increase. And I guess I wonder if it's better to just say, as is typical, this is the time of year that rates are set and these are the rates, as opposed to it feels like a little bit like there's an outside phenomenon happening.
So maybe add for the next rate period, which is August 1st to whatever. Because
Yeah.
as we're writing
Yeah,
these,
yeah.
Yeah.
The next
Yeah, for
scheduled
the
rate
next
period.
scheduled rate
Scheduled
period,
rate,
yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, good point.
yeah,
It's a
good,
regular thing.
good catch.
It was interesting to see, I mean, Eversource, and I don't know where CPCNA said, they said in testimony, they talked about 15 cents, but it turned out 40. But I looked back on Eversource's rate filing and it was 14 cents. They may have had in testimony that they were considering up to 15 or something, but their their rate filing was what was approved. They never, yeah. Whereas Liberty went in and had a proposal for 20-something cents or 19, and the PUC brought it back down into a more reasonable
15 or
rate.
17.
Two issues. Period of time over which you amortize
Yeah.
last winter.
Yeah.
And how you set the proxy rate.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's
It was the
What's-
method of the proxy rate.
done it a certain way that it would have gone up to 15, I think.
Okay.
I listened in on the rate setting workshop for members that CPCNH did, and they did suggest that Eversource wanted to say 15 cents, but the PUC said no.
Yeah.
That's the message that
Their filing though on the 18th of June had the rate that ultimate was the rate that was approved.
So, good to know.
Well, yeah, Eversource testified that a rate of 15 cents would be more likely to recover actual costs compared with the PUC directed method and approved rate of 14 cents.
I mean, the reality is, right, that in this world, and they're operating CPCH in their world, but the utilities are always subject to the regulators' kind of desire to kind of feather out rates and to not have rate shock, right? You know, the utilities often will go in for $120 million rate case. That's totally justified in terms of cost increases, but then only get 60 million because the PUC doesn't want rates to. So the fact that the PUC makes some decisions that the playing field is not, I don't think, a point I guess I'm trying to make is never going to be necessarily even between a nonprofit CPC&H and a regulated utility market that's subject to decisions by the PUC to try to keep rates down.
Yeah.
You know,
2 points in that, and as we try to get this hammered together, I think are you saying, Kevin, is we should be careful about that 15 cents with Eversource?
we don't say it in here. They said it in their press release. They said that they made the reference to the 15
Okay.
in their press release, but in ours, we're giving, you know, what Eversource
Okay.
approved. Yeah, no, there was, that 15 didn't make it into ours.
And then the other point was that if you've been watching the New Hampshire Co-op, a nonprofit with good reserves, I think, they're coming in at 13.6 or something like that. And in the board meeting Friday, CPC&H risk management member was saying, he was arguing, let's keep trying to rebuild the reserve faster because we could get to where the co-op is and we would be more competitive because the co-op is buying longer hedges for a longer period of time. So it's extra capital. So long way of saying, for the average person out there, it's probably all inside baseball, but building the reserve, at least I believe, will make them more competitive. Future. Like always beat the utility? I don't know. Nobody is saying they can always beat the utility.
No, and I think they have to rebuild the reserve first, take advantage of some financing options. I think they have debt that they need to retire. They borrowed when the reserves went negative.
Yeah.
So, but everything I'm reading in recent months is things are moving in the right direction.
Oh, yeah. No, they're the last 4 months, they've had much more surplus than they planned. But I think, again, they were aggressive with the 2-cent adder and that paid off. At least, I mean, it paid off for the balance sheet. It lost a couple of towns.
I was just hopeful that they would beat Eversource this time by even a fraction, just for the optics, right?
Yeah.
You know, because now we're in 4 rate periods in a row.
True. But
And, you know, I don't. I think at some point they just need a rate that's lower than the utility.
You and me both. That's what most
Well, I think
sincere wish.
it's also important to remember that when the community power first started up, Eversource was operating on different rules. And they had the rules changed, which they thought would improve their situation. And so we've been operating under our own rules from day one. It's still the same ones, and nobody's changing them for us. So it's obvious the Eversource is going to try to compete with us a little bit too. So it's going to be hard to kind of beat them all again if the rules don't change back to what it was before,
I honestly don't know if it was the utility advocating for the changes.
No, it wasn't the utility, but
PUC.
but the PUC, yeah. So
You could argue that the playing field wasn't level when we went live in
That's right.
2023,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
CPC&H had the advantage then.
Absolutely.
then, yes, they did.
That
Yeah.
was their strategic
That's right.
advantage,
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
utilities were forced to purchase twice a year, potentially at very high periods, which happened in 22, 23. And so
We didn't have
the
to-
playing field was not level net, and now
That's right.
it's kind of going the other way, and there's aspects of the current playing field that aren't perhaps
Yeah.
fair to the CPC&H.
Yeah, I mean,
So, but they have strong lobbying, and hopefully some of this gets, shakes out.
well, and I don't think the utilities want to have to keep buying 50% of the spot market and spot and proxy rates either.
No, that's an annoyance.
Well, it's gonna be pretty interesting just to watch the next year,
Mhm.
what energy prices are gonna do. With the whole war and the Middle East and everything, that kind of disruption has not fully impacted everybody yet. But that's gonna have an impact on a lot of things, at least for next year.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to kind of not make any decisions quickly yet.
So we'll put MC's language in about the next
Yep.
scheduled rate increase. We'll take out the stuff about some people can't afford.
Mhm,
We've taken out the stuff about source of the 15%, that's not in there.
mhm.
Matter.
Yeah. take
Yeah,
out
or,
the,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it will be shorter to the point, which is always good. So last thing I mentioned, the refresh or not to refresh. I put in your packet some correspondence with Jackson. They're looking at a refresh September. There's only 650 people involved.
For Portsmouth.
For Portsmouth. If we, we had a big number of fresh people and it caused us a little bit of heartburn. Because there was such a great gap. Tom Rooney was on the phone and his input is maybe you want to have a policy that we don't refresh when there's a 10% difference in prices or a 15% difference in prices. But you allow refreshes to go forward if you're single digit variance. So that was his thought on it.
Yeah. I understand kind of the point of that. We kind of were talking about that last time, but I think the mayor even mentioned this at one of the meetings where it's like, well, then you end up getting two camps. I mean, we're a city that's involved, that is a member of community power.
Yeah.
And those new customers that are new to the city that are going to be brought in as part of the refresh, as part of the process. I don't know why they don't do it monthly like it was done in Massachusetts, but that's whole nother story I've talked about, just a normal monthly process. But I just think we need to do a better job of communicating in advance. We kind of didn't do that well enough this last time, right? It kind of got way down the road before we started to act on it. But if we know it's coming and we can do a good job of communicating You know, it could be a piece in the newsletter, you know, residents new to
Explaining this a little bit.
the city, you're gonna be brought on to, you know, blah, 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 such a date, you have the ability to opt. You know, we can do things to communicate. I don't know if you want to start gaming it where you know, you're benefiting some customers with a lower Eversource rate to some period in the future. I don't know if we want to go down that path.
2 rate classes.
Yeah. And then when do you switch them over, you know? Do they, you know, at some point they got to come onto the program, and when do you do that? I just think it's a matter of effective communications, and and hopefully the numbers when we have a refresh are in the 3-digit range and not 3,000 like we had last time or whatever that number was.
Yeah, right. And 3,000 with a 30% difference.
Right.
It
That's just my
would
2 cents.
helpful. I mean, I recognize that the scenario that one of our former counselors was affected by, which is that she had deliberately opted out of Portsmouth Community Power, then she moved and got refreshed back into Portsmouth Community Power and was not happy about it. So if there is some way for Eversource to double check the refresh, or CPCNH, to refresh Eversource's list to make sure that it does not include someone else who might have opted out and moved, because that counselor isn't gonna be affected again, because the reason that happened was because she moved, she had a new address, she was a new customer. But it's a source of aggravation to those customers, and, you know, I opted out and you opted me back in and all of this, they did this horrible thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we can ask them to do that.
I don't know. I mean, that kind of stuff seems like it'd be a onesie twosie, you know,
Yeah.
remote
Mm-hmm.
example that someone moved within the same community after opting out.
Although she said her account number was the same.
Yeah.
So that should be the basis on which she's
Yeah.
permanent.
So that's something to bring to CPC&H's
You
attention.
should keep her preference.
Yeah.
The meter, not the account number, but
I think you're right.
yeah.
Ben or MC, you have thoughts on the refresher?
It's a new issue for me.
I think having a policy that sets a parameter value so that we can just set it and forget it and not be arbitrary makes good sense. I don't know if 10% is the right level. I think maybe 5%. I'm not sure.
So what are you saying? If it's 5%, you're gonna leave them with the utility?
Yeah,
For how long?
not sure. But not just automatically refresh them in.
I mean, they were automatically brought onto the program to begin with.
Right.
With the same parameters of ability to opt out and all that stuff. It's like a mini enrollment, like when we went live in 23. The entire city was brought on.
Right.
They had no choice. They were brought on and they could opt out, right? And this is like this in a much smaller, you know, micro enrollment where they're being brought, the city's on the program. So I don't know how you have a group of customers where you just say, we're going to allow you to stay off the program for how long?
My thought was we migrated the whole city, but then there was a delay. And I think you had mentioned that other jurisdictions do a monthly rolling,
Yeah, it's just part of,
just a monthly sweep.
they get meter data, billing data.
If we're
and
not
new
gonna do
customer
a
data.
monthly sweep,
Yeah, which they're not.
if they're not gonna do a monthly sweep, which I think makes more sense and
Yeah.
is consistent with, I think, what you're describing. And you have a group of folks that are just kind of like, it's growing and growing and growing. Maybe not an automatic refresh where we automatically dump you in, maybe more of, well, if it's lagged for a while and there's a significant delta, I think you do something more than just automatically switch them in and say, sorry, you can opt out. I think you do a little bit more of a targeted communication.
Well, absolutely, obviously a communication.
Yeah.
No question. We didn't do the communication.
We didn't do the communication, we let the thing build, and then we just opted a bunch of people over at a terrible time.
Right. What we're saying though,
And if we want to catch that from happening, I think the idea is to have a policy in place that we're not just going to automatically do something, we're going to do something else. And so if we need to find a threshold, I don't know what the right threshold is, but
but you're saying a threshold though, where we would not transfer them.
I'm
regardless
saying
of effective
we shouldn't let
communication,
it
we
get
wouldn't
as
transfer
big
it.
as we do, and if it does, we should handle it differently, whatever
Yeah.
that means.
The decision
Well,
of
that's-
when to do a
there's a
refresh
couple things
is not within our purview. They have that whole policy you attached describes their protocol for deciding when to do a refresh.
Yeah, okay, so,
That's in their wheelhouse.
so you're saying the policy, they're our default supplier, and the policy is they get refreshed. And if you don't refresh them, you're setting up an advantaged minority of customers and, or two classes of customers, which is really against what being a default provider is. And Ben, you're saying, is there some way to have a set it and forget it policy? Over a certain threshold, we hold them back.
But
But then you're also saying we don't want it to build up.
I'm not sure I fully understand exactly why we can't automatically sweep them in every month.
Yeah.
But I understand that Tom had suggested something that maybe would benefit from something less ad hoc and more
Right.
formulaic.
Mhm.
And
No, I
so
don't
if the formula is on the table there, I'm suggesting that we don't let the group get as big. And if it does get as big, we handle it differently than we did last time.
Tom
If
was
I
not saying anything
confuse
about
that-
getting it big. He was just, Tom was saying, and wasn't on the phone call, but I was just saying, should we have a threshold that we do not enroll them?
Yeah, and
Anything under that, we do enroll them with an effective communication plan.
and I don't wanna,
But we'd end up though with a situation where you'd end up, if it's over a certain amount, if it's 5% delta in the rate, 10%, then we're gonna have a subset of customers, residents in the city that aren't in the program. And I don't know if that's the path we want to go down.
I had meant that we could still get them in the program. I just think the way that we did it last time was not the way to do it.
Absolutely was not.
So sweep them in, but sweep them in a more thoughtful, informed
Right,
manner.
right. But the sweep is going to be at CPC&H's
Discretion.
discretion. That's the policy.
They set the refresher.
right, but I think if you read their finance people's report, there's an appetite now to do it.
They bring them on. Yeah, they want them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the approach is to go straight after the automatic sweep.
Right. Yeah.
That solves the problem.
That's the best.
You'd still but then we would need a monthly communication plan, because even if it was 75 customers,
No,
you'd have to communicate with those 75 customers.
remember, they notify people who get refreshed. Our communication problem was that their piece didn't show the rate comparison. That's right. So,
They swept them in.
and I think,
Without knowing what
Yeah.
the rates are.
so
I don't think
that-
they're going down that monthly. I brought that up. I was blue in the face when I was on the board. And they have decided on an approach where they want to massage when they do it based upon various parameters that they discuss in their policy. So I think that ship has sailed in terms of them. They've set the approach to how they're going to do it. Our decision, our option here is, do we want parameters to, yes, bring everybody in, but with a good communication plan, or above a certain amount of rate delta, we put these people on the side, but then it comes into play, when do you bring them into the program? And I don't know if we want to, that seems like a slippery slope.
Snowballs.
Yeah, it does snowball.
It's all about the
I
effectiveness of the
think
communication.
Nashua held theirs back, and
It had to be a huge number.
it's gotta be a huge number.
They're the biggest in the state.
So that's, if you play the movie forward.
But
Doesn't
I
have
thought,
to
I
end.
thought, I thought you just said that CPNC is the one that sets when they refresh. And we don't have any say in that. But how come Nashua had to say in keeping, allowing a large number to build up? Why wasn't that refreshed earlier? They had the right to just do it their way.
All the member towns have the right to hold back their refreshes.
Last time we just didn't.
We do, okay, so
We
What
just
the,
didn't act.
what the method of doing that is, the best method,
Huh?
is to have the council pass a motion that
okay, so we have some
if
control
the
over that.
difference in price is so much, we
Okay,
don't refresh.
okay.
But that still doesn't solve the problem of where do they go?
And what about if our rate was all of a sudden lower than ever? Would we want to refresh
Refresh them all?
faster so they can save money?
I just think we have to have a very effective communication plan, and we have to make sure that the council knows what the timing and process is, so we don't have any
Surprises.
repeat
Yeah.
concern over kind of like what happened last time.
And I suggest we try again, because maybe they've come around to Kevin's wisdom.
Yeah,
What is that?
We're all catching up eventually to you, right?
yeah, every month.
But an automatic sweep is the way to go.
Yeah, they didn't
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
Well,
Hey, this is supposed to be driven from the bottom up, not the top down.
I mean, it's, yeah. So what I'm hearing is there's not a feeling that we should have a policy
of setting aside
of setting aside.
residents that are, if the delta is above a certain amount, I think it's all about the communications. CPC&A should be communicating, but I think then we also should kind of on top of that have a communication plan that's ready to roll and is repeatable, because this, they might do refreshes every 6 months, every 3 months, and we should be ready to just do whatever that communication plan is every time there's a refresh.
Let's manage being clear on when that refresh is, because we missed the notice, which is part of the reason we didn't respond faster to the 3,000.
Right. And I'm sure Tom will be super sensitive to any refreshes that are in the pipeline, making sure we know.
Yeah, I think they're talking September. As I said, you look back on that big slug, 2,800, whatever it was, and they weren't transparent about the rates.
Right.
So, but we can also
We have to make sure that
insist that they are.
yeah.
And I think they heard that when they came here
Yeah.
in our work session. So I would hope they've remedied it, but we can check on that.
even their press releases are mentioning the utility rates now, even though they said if they were lower than
That's
Liberty,
right.
but they were within,
Yes.
instead of saying higher than Eversource and higher than, they said they were within 7%, but the other one, they were lower than.
You're not wrong when
Look,
you stay honest about it, people.
Oh, what?
I try to
But
fight.
they did get the rates in their press release, which they did not have last time.
Yes, that's progress. Tracy, you have thoughts?
I agree we should have a consistent policy. I'm a little unclear or unsure about having any sort of carve out where if it's 5 or 10%, I feel like then it just gets confusing. And if someone on another refresh didn't make it into that, then
Yeah.
they could have a concern with that. So,
And then when do you bring them in?
right.
Right,
And what
you have
about
to
the people
monitor
that were
it.
already in? And
Yeah.
so just setting a policy
Yeah.
that maybe this is what we've signed up for and
As distasteful as it is to bring somebody on to a higher rate, it's just,
Yeah,
it's kind of what we signed up with for as being part of this program,
Yeah.
you know?
Know about distasteful. I think,
Well, I mean, just from
yeah.
from a human
As-
standpoint.
No, I guess I just observing this, and I know that I'm new to this topic, but I did take a course in my master's program where my professor was like a specialist in community choice aggregation, and we had read through his research, and I just remember, and I actually went back and had an email exchange with him because I was trying to figure out, like, wrap my head around this, and he said, competitive rates to utility supply should never be a driving reason for a CCA. It should really be about community choice and optionality for those customers in terms of the composition, the kind of the carbon intensity of their electricity. And so to me, the challenging premise is that like we really want a rate that's competitive or like under Eversource, when maybe that's a challenging starting point or an expectation of a CCA, which oftentimes, I remember going back to the research, oftentimes starts more competitive, but that competitive advantage erodes over time just because of kind of market dynamics, regulatory change. Like we're gonna not see a very competitive, it's not gonna be competitive. And I think we have to, I don't know, I guess my view is we have to be okay with the community, like a rate that's gonna be higher than the default supply. And that just might be the case. I don't know.
I guess my point, I agree with
Yeah.
what you said, but like, if you move into Portsmouth, okay, I need electricity, I sign up with Eversource.
You should
It's,
see-
it's
you
12
should-
cents, and then 3 months later, I get a notice, oh, we're switching you over. That's where I'm saying, just as an individual who
Yeah.
doesn't really understand the whole thing, it's like, wait a second, I'm with Eversource.
Yeah,
I just got moved to a community power and it's 3
Yeah.
cents higher. That's what happened last time.
totally, yeah.
And
And that's why CPCNH's notification should say we're the default, you get moved to the default. The rates are this, and you
can stay
have
with
the
Eversource.
choice,
Maybe
the
the
freedom to choose.
communications plan, like maybe we can audit that communication, that default communication that they send out. That could be useful. And also I was just trying to look around on our website, like, do we have a landing page on how our power works? Cause I don't know, it was easy for me to find press releases. It was harder for me to find maybe a place where CPCNH was explained, the default rate was explained, like how people are brought on, the way to opt out. So just like a single live is this? Okay, well, maybe it's just a
Engine.
exactly search engine optimization problem, perhaps. Okay, all right. I was just thinking about those communication touch points.
Got refresh middle of the rate period. You're setting people aside because if you get swept,
Yeah.
why not just sweep them into the next pay period?
You know, I think we should maybe consider having a less defensive position every time we issue some kind of a press release. Instead of kind of
if it's higher.
trying to mitigate areas that somebody might have an objection to or concerns about, just say, welcome, you're now part of this community. We want to inform you that this is the rate we are offering, this is the rate the utility's offering. And we have choices with regard to the carbon content of our choices. We want to also remind you that you have the right to switch to any other provider if you don't like this offering. But right now, you're part of this community. And not be defensive about it. This is just the way it is.
Well, I think
And you can explain why Portsmouth
you don't want to
decided
seem,
to
yes,
become part of this,
assert why this is.
Yeah.
But this is, it's going to be a recurring exercise from
Yep.
now till
That's right.
we're, so we should just have a communication plan that's effective, that can get turned on, whenever we need it.
Yep.
And,
Okay, so how do we get a sense of where the committee's at here?
I think the first recommendation was to see if there could be a monthly refresh, if that option is something that might be considered again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think that's a non-starter.
Oh, it's okay.
And what's
They've
the,
already, they've just put a whole 9 months developing their refresh plan. It was approved by their board. It's in the documents that's attached to this. It's,
So what is
And
that?
they-
Is it 9 months? Or
they have a parameters of when their experts in this area decide when they want to do a refresh. It's in the plan. And the plan was adopted within the past some number of months. I don't mean to be dismissive, but
So
they
what is that plan?
Well,
I don't know what it is.
I don't know the timing. It's in the
Well,
plan.
that's what I'm
Let's
curious.
say it's twice a year.
Okay, so say every
First in
6 months.
September Is what it's
Yeah,
working out to
if
be
that's
this
what it
year.
is,
If this year is typical.
I think we should still ask.
Yeah, I think so too.
Just be on the record.
Yeah.
City prefers an automatic refresh so
it's
that
a
we don't
better-
have this problem
better-
anymore.
Method.
In lieu of that, we want to make sure that your communication includes information about the alternatives and the ability
Yeah.
to switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I didn't hear consensus on a policy.
Okay.
But I would also say the problem doesn't go away with an automatic refresh. Instead of 600 customers, you may have 95. You're still going to have to communicate with those 95 customers to tell them why they're being brought onto
I
the
agree.
program.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a smaller number that you're communicating
yeah.
with.
Sure,
It doesn't go away.
Doesn't go.
totally agree.
It's the same letter. It's a new group of people. They've never seen the old letter.
The benefit of it was just onesie twosies and you weren't having the potential of a big issue where you have thousands of customers within a community being refreshed in bulk.
So is it a cost issue that they think if they bring people on every month, it will be
They're-
more costly for them to do it every 6 months or? What's the driving issue there?
I think if you read the policy, they go into the details.
Well, if you have to explain it in such policy, it's pretty complicated.
Read the.
I don't.
I will, yeah.
It's in the packet, yeah.
I have no idea, but if you had a little bit more discretion over how much you're buying, it may make your portfolio development a little bit.
That I think that's part of
Okay,
theirs.
Okay, yeah, that could be, yeah, could be.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it from the customer perspective, not.
So just to put this to bed. I'll ask each of you, would you be in favor of a policy to hold back refreshes at a 5 or 10% delta in price to the utility?
Without a plan for when we would do the refresh, I would not support the policy.
Okay. Kevin?
If you had a set period of time, I would reconsider.
So it has to do with whether we're building up a backlog. Kevin?
I think it has more hairs on it than it's worth.
Peter?
I go along with Ben's suggestion.
Tracy?
No, I would support it. I think having a consistent policy where we are right now is
MC?
a better plan.
Yeah, I think just a few more details, like what happens next makes sense to me.
Okay.
And there's a caveat with all of this is that we just have a better communication plan than we had last time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's what I'll report back to the council.
And I think we always focus on price and often there are a lot of other reasons, soft reasons that the decision was made to go with this and we need to keep hammering on those. What are the long-term benefits and, why we think this is better for the community over the long term.
Yes, and one of those, in my opinion, I totally agree with what you said, Tracy, is the representation in Congress.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where I think
Yeah.
we're making the most progress.
Yeah.
During this difficult stretch, I think they're still making progress on that front.
I mean, my case, when I talk to people about we're playing the long game here is one, we have a power provider that gives you green choices, which the utility doesn't. No. Two, we've got the aggregation of 68 towns and cities, which can produce meaningful changes in Concord. And there's never been any counterweight to the utilities in terms of lobbying. Three, I happen to believe, as we heard in the board meeting, that if the reserve is built back to a healthy amount, we'll be like the New Hampshire Co-op, a nonprofit that, uses a portfolio method of buying and tends to predictably be a little lower, not a lot lower, but a little lower. And not every time, but the co-op's got a pretty good record as a nonprofit. And that to me is the paragon of what you want to be.
And even an option on the non-green, just having an option on the default rate versus the utility rate. Because I'm confident there will be periods again where it's a little cheaper than the utility and it might flip back and
Go back.
But just having the two options there's no risk in that. That's great for the residents to have, right? Just like right now, if they want to go to 14, they can go to Eversource. If they want to stay at 14.9, they can stay with CPC&H.
Well, we needed to address this because we won't meet in August. And it was raised at the council, so
I mean, maybe Peter can ask them again why they're not doing a monthly refresh, just to educate us as a committee why they're not, they're doing it periodically versus.
it seems like it'd be advantageous to them.
So I don't know, but just for our
Except maybe
education.
It might be mailing expense. They want a time mailing expense.
Yeah, I think there's labor associated with administering it on their end and they want to do it periodically.
All right. Well, that was a discussion about it. It's a tricky one. The player that interests me is Freedom. Have you been watching Freedom Energy?
Are you talking about the mailers that are being sent out to us, soliciting us as Eversource customers? You might want to consider signing up with us.
Freedom has kicked off Hudson and Epping. Saying we can get your town lower rates.
I think maybe one of the Northampton, maybe.
No.
Not yet.
And so far they've delivered on it.
And who is this Freedom?
It's a for-profit
It's
supplier.
It's a
Right?
broker.
Gus Bart from Bill Short.
Exactly.
I'll be surprised if they have green options.
They do.
Are they an aggregate, a broker, or are they a supplier? Broker.
They're an LSC,
An LSC is
load serving entity there. They're at the meetings I go to. I know those guys.
I know they were in to speak to Northampton.
Like they have 6 cities, 6 municipalities: Hampstead, Laconia, Londonderry, Merrimack, Salem, and Wyndham that are participating in their CCA.
have they got some source of supply that's unique?
Well, they have,
Business.
what'd you say? It's procurement, they're not generating. Yeah, it's the same. I'm
And
not sure why.
do you know what terms they have as far as duration?
Good question. I don't know. I think the rate periods tend to be longer.
Gonna lock you in for 12 to 18 months sometimes.
Well, did anybody get these mailers from this company? I don't even know what the exact name is anymore. I got 2 of these and it says basically we can offer 100% clean energy to you for 1 year period at a rate that was lower than community power. And it in the mailer, it has the address label indicates utility Eversource. Then when you open it, it's just, okay, it's as an Eversource customer somehow. They got my address, or, I mean, how do they know I'm interested in 100% green? I'm signed up for 100% green now, but. And how can they offer me 1 year of a cheaper price?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, you've talked about your experience in Massachusetts. There's a lot of players that are kind
Yeah, some of them are a little bit of the Wild West.
Don't
know,
they
they-
have to be vetted or at least allowed to be in the New Hampshire market Because there used to be a list on the
Yeah, to be a,
PUC website, right?
yeah, those have to be licensed suppliers.
In order to solicit in New Hampshire. But they're doing it to me, so
Yeah, I mean, you don't know if they'll be able to keep that rate 2 or 3 years down the road.
yeah, I know, I grant that. But
Be interesting to see if that company was
yeah, I'm
is
gonna,
on the.
I'm gonna,
you look at the
I'm gonna check
PUC
them
rate,
out.
rate
I'm
board,
gonna
if
check
they're
them out.
actually,
Yeah.
if it's an offering on their rate offerings.
Mhm.
Okay. Tracy, I updated everybody on window dressers.
Thank you, and I apologize for being so late.
No problem.
Yeah, so thank you very much for connecting me with Karen Conrad. I think we're looking at January 25th through February 1st to have a window dressers build at the community campus.
Oh, great.
And it will be Portsmouth, and I'm partnering with someone in York who has done this, and a couple people from window dressers, and I toured the facility again yesterday, and they're pretty excited about,
Super.
it will work, so thank you.
So the
Yeah,
build would be
right.
when?
January 25th through February 1st.
Mark your calendars. Anything else, folks?
Counselor, we haven't approved minutes yet.
Oh. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve minutes from June.
Okay,
I wasn't there, so.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. There's no more business? Oh, public comment? Do we have any?
We do not, there was a question about meeting in August. We're on the calendar. No, maybe we're not on. the
No,
calendar.
no August.
So, not August.
No. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
In favor?
USA's playing right now.
It's for now,
8 o'clock.
is it?
Who's playing?
USA Soccer.
The soccer team.
Of